If we don't remove the person in charge, the whole operation is going to sink. We cannot allow any more mistakes. Amid the roar of heavy rain, the small regional sales office was filled with angry shouting. At the center of it all stood the leader of the sales team, known for her beauty, Margaret. Normally, she could pull any project together, no matter how difficult. But this time, she was being blamed for the logistics shutdown caused by the torrential rain. We could have completed the delivery as scheduled. It was the unexpected downpour that. Do you really think unexpected is an acceptable excuse? Your risk management was completely inadequate. The accusations flew at her one after another, as if everyone had been waiting for a chance to bring her down. Flooded, severed transport routes, emergency supplies that could not be delivered. At this rate, even lives could be at risk. But still, firing her is just too much. Be quiet. Stanley, we need to reevaluate the entire sales team. Otherwise, we will just repeat the same mistakes. While the room descended into chaos, Margaret's expression grew more and more cornered. Although there were a few voices trying to defend her, the overwhelming majority demanded that she be fired. That's enough. Before I realized it, my voice had cut through the tense atmosphere. Several people turned to me with expressions that said, "Who even are you?" It was true, I had just been reassigned here after a demotion. But that didn't matter now. If we thoroughly analyze the routes, there is still a way to deliver the supplies. Based on the current rainfall data, operating my tablet, I began mobilizing every bit of information and every formula I knew, desperately searching for a way to make a miracle happen. The air still buzzed with skepticism. What is this guy talking about? But Margaret was different. She alone looked at me with eyes that seemed to place her last hope in me. No one could have imagined that this moment, when I unexpectedly reached out to help, would end up dramatically changing the fate of Margaret, me, and this entire regional branch. My name is Theodore, and I work for Global Emotional Logistics, a world-renowned shipping company. We leverage every mode of transportation to build efficient logistics networks across the globe. I belong to the optimization algorithm development team, which could be called the heart of the company. Our team is based in the Boston branch. Right now, I am working on optimizing the shipping routes from the West Coast to Europe. I am developing an algorithm that factors in weather data, ocean currents, fuel efficiency, port congestion, and even the global political situation. As I was working, my colleague Norman came over. "Did you read the materials from yesterday's meeting?" "Yeah, I read them. There are three major issues. First, the North Atlantic route they proposed does not account for summer weather patterns. Second, they are approximating the inverse relationship between sailing speed and fuel consumption using a linear model, which will clearly introduce errors. And, without taking my eyes off the monitor, I answered, and I could see out of the corner of my eye that Norman's expression gradually stiffened. "Sorry, I guess I got too technical again." No. Anyway, the team meeting starts at 10. Make sure you are not late." Norman left with an awkward smile. This kind of exchange was an everyday occurrence for me. In my head, countless variables danced and branched into endless possibilities. But somehow, whenever I tried to put it into words, it never seemed to come across. The more accurately I tried to explain, the wider the distance grew between me and everyone else. Maybe there was another approach, but I had no idea what it was. At 10 o'clock, I headed to the meeting room. Our project leader, James, asked for updates on last week's progress, and everyone gave concise reports. When it was my turn, I could feel the air in the room stiffen for a moment. "Theodore, how's the algorithm improvement coming along from last week?" "Yes, I am implementing it in 3 phases. In the first phase, I have constructed a weather adaptation model using Bayesian estimation. In the second phase, I am deriving the optimal balance between fuel consumption and sailing speed through nonlinear optimization. In the third phase." As I spoke, the confusion on everyone's faces became more and more evident. "Wonderful. I'll read the report in detail later," James said cheerfully. However, I understood that this was his way of subtly telling me, you don't need to speak anymore. After the meeting, someone from the team would likely translate my report and reframe it in a way they could understand. When that happened, crucial points would inevitably get lost. It had happened several times before, but I had never said anything. After the meeting, I quietly continued to refine the accuracy of the algorithm. Someday, surely, the brilliance of my theories would be recognized, and I would be able to contribute to the company. With that belief, I buried myself even deeper in the world of numbers. A few days later, I was summoned to the office of Thomas, the head of the main branch. We received a request from the headquarters. They want you to return to Japan. For what reason? I asked calmly, trying to hide my anxiety. Everyone acknowledges your technical skills. However, there have been concerns about your teamwork. It seems the headquarters believes there is an environment in Japan where your talents can be better utilized. I could not hide my shock. It was true that communication with those around me had not been smooth, but I had thought it was because explaining complex theories was inherently difficult. Maybe I should have tried harder. And so, 1 week later, I found myself on a flight to Japan. During the long hours of the flight, I reflected on everything that had happened. If only I had been able to explain things more clearly. But once back in Japan, the language barrier would be gone. Things would surely go better. 2 months passed after my return to Japan. The view from the large glass windows at the headquarters revealed the vibrant life of a city that felt different from Boston. However, the atmosphere I felt within the company was, unfortunately, the same. Theodore, can you submit this document to Elliot? Sure. As I took the document, I glanced over its contents. Immediately, I spotted the problem. The forecast numbers for the Asia-Pacific route are wrong. With this growth rate, next year's increase would not be 12.3%, but rather 8.7%. The coefficient for the impact of climate change is underestimated. The colleague who handed me the document looked troubled. Theodore, these figures have already been approved by the board. We can't change them now. You're just going to leave it even though the data is wrong? If you had something to say, you should have pointed it out during the meeting. It was true I had explained it at last week's meeting. However, as usual, my explanation was buried in technical jargon, and no one truly understood the core of what I was saying. I had genuinely tried my best to convey it. Whatever, I'll explain it to Elliot myself. My colleague gave a pained expression and returned to his desk. I headed off to meet with Elliot that afternoon. However, even when I explained the issues to Elliot, he did not understand. Theodore, your theory is certainly brilliant, but in a team environment, if others cannot understand your proposals, they are meaningless, Elliot said. But Elliot, if we proceed like this, we will definitely incur losses. I'm saying this for the good of the company. I understand your passion very well, but business is not just about numbers. Relationships between people are important too. But the facts are, that's enough. You were supposed to join the Kanto optimization project, but we might have to reconsider that. Elliot waved his hand wearily, signaling that I should leave. Reluctantly, I left the director's office. A week later, I was called to the HR department at headquarters. Theodore, you are being reassigned to the Greenfield branch. The middle-aged woman from the HR department informed me without changing her expression. An alarm rang inside my head. The Greenfield branch was located in a regional city far from the headquarters. Is this a demotion? This is a positive transfer. We would like you to demonstrate your abilities in the field. She said it calmly. The next day, I exchanged farewells with my colleagues at the headquarters. On the surface, they sent me off with smiles, but behind those smiles was a clear sense of relief. Finally, some peace and quiet. The view from the bullet train window gradually shifted from the urban landscape to the suburbs, and eventually to lush countryside. Displayed on my phone was an overview of the Greenfield branch. Its annual volume was less than 1% of that of the headquarters, and it had only about 30 employees. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel despair. In fact, there was a part of me that was hopeful. Maybe at a small branch, my theories could be applied more directly. Even if the scale was small, if I could contribute to the company. All right, time to start fresh in a new environment. I muttered to myself as I gazed at the mountains gradually drawing closer. When I arrived at the Greenfield branch, I was greeted by a woman with a smile as warm as the spring sunlight. Welcome, Theodore. I'm Margaret. I serve as the sales representative and team leader. It's a pleasure to meet you. Dressed in a suit, she carried herself with a dignified yet gentle air. Her elegantly tied black hair, her translucent fair skin, and her clear eyes that gazed straight at me. I almost found myself at a loss for words, captivated by her beauty. I'm Theodore. It's a pleasure to meet you, I said, a little nervously, as I handed her my business card. Come on, let me show you around the branch first. Margaret walked ahead with light, brisk steps, and I followed behind her, carrying my small bag. The inside of the branch was far more lively than I had expected. About 30 employees worked efficiently within the limited space. Whenever they saw Margaret, they greeted her with bright smiles. Their curious gazes occasionally turned toward me as well. After the tour, Margaret guided me into a small reception room. You must be tired. Please have some tea. She carefully poured hot water from a teapot and handed me a cup. Thank you. You came from the headquarters, right? I imagine it's quite a different environment, but this is truly a wonderful place. There was warmth in Margaret's voice. Is this your hometown, Margaret? Yes, I was born and raised here. What made you join Global Emotional Logistics? Well, it's a bit of a long story. Would you mind listening? I nodded silently. When I was in high school, a major typhoon hit this region. Roads were severed, and many villages became isolated. At the time, my grandfather lived in a small mountain village, and he was about to run out of his medication. Although medical teams worked tirelessly, they lacked supplies, and the roads were completely cut off. Margaret's expression grew a little somber. At that time, the people from Global Emotional Logistics risked everything, driving small trucks up treacherous mountain roads to deliver the needed supplies. Thanks to them, not only my grandfather, but many lives were saved. That was when I realized just how important logistics work is. It supports lives and entire communities. And that's why you joined the company? Yes. After graduating from university, I joined this company without any hesitation. I initially trained at the Tokyo headquarters, but 3 years ago, I requested a transfer back to this branch, my hometown, she explained. Why did you want to come back? Margaret looked straight into my eyes. This town is facing depopulation. Young people are leaving for the cities, and the elderly population is growing. That's exactly why logistics are becoming even more vital. Delivery services for those who can no longer shop on their own. Distribution networks that bring our local specialties to people across the country. I want to protect this town and its people. I want to be someone who supports lives and smiles, just like the day my grandfather was saved. I was left speechless. I didn't know how to respond to the strength of determination I saw reflected in her eyes. Margaret stood up and pointed to the townscape spread out beyond the window. Everything up to those mountains you see over there is our area. It might be a small branch, but the role we play is a big one. I hurriedly stood up and joined her by the window. The lush green mountains surrounded the townscape. It was a view completely different from Boston or the headquarters. I'll do my best, I said, surprised at how naturally the words came out of my mouth. Thank you. Let's support this town together. Margaret beamed with a radiant smile. The brilliance of that smile made me narrow my eyes for a moment, and all I could do was nod. A week passed since my transfer to the Greenfield branch. I spent my days at a small desk, analyzing the logistics data of the branch. Though the scale was much smaller compared to the headquarters or Boston, the patterns were surprisingly complex. Delivery routes through mountainous regions, seasonal changes in traffic conditions, and the unique weather patterns of the area. There was a wealth of fascinating data. Theodore, great work, Margaret said with a smile as she handed me a cup of coffee. She was always thoughtful and attentive. Thanks, Margaret. How's the data working out for you? It's very helpful, especially the past logs for the mountain delivery routes. I'm glad to hear that. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask, she said warmly. Just then, the door at the branch entrance swung open, and Charles, the chairman of the local shopping district association, rushed in. Margaret, I need your help. What's wrong, Charles? Margaret immediately stood up. The special tents we need for tomorrow morning haven't arrived. The supplier had some trouble. Got it. I'll check the stock at nearby branches and make sure we get them by tomorrow morning. Really? Thank you. You're always such a help. Everyone in the shopping district says that if we ask Margaret, everything gets solved, Charles said as he grasped both of Margaret's hands. His eyes were filled with trust and gratitude. After Charles left, Margaret got busy arranging things over the phone, while nearby, a female employee let out a small sigh. It was Barbara. She worked in the same sales department as Margaret. Barbara leaned over and whispered to a neighboring female employee. There she goes again. Everyone relies on her like she's some kind of saint, but she really is good at her job. Of course, she's beautiful, smart, and has all the local connections, but people like her are hard to approach. She's just too perfect. Another male employee, overhearing them, joined in quietly. Yeah, Margaret is reliable, but even if you go drinking with her, you have to be on your best behavior. She always ends up talking about work. Listening to their conversation, I glanced around the branch. The employees kept a respectful but definite distance from Margaret. They treated her with courtesy, but hardly anyone spoke to her in a familiar way. I noticed Margaret looking toward Barbara and the others. For just a moment, her expression clouded with loneliness, but she quickly returned to her usual bright smile and resumed her work. I took a file and walked over to Margaret's desk. Margaret, could you take a look at this data? Of course, she answered brightly. However, beneath her smile, I sensed a trace of exhaustion. About earlier. I faltered. I didn't know what to say. It's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm used to it. Margaret gave a slightly self-deprecating smile. I could feel the loneliness hidden beneath her outward brightness. About a month after arriving at the Greenfield branch, I finally began to grasp the overall logistics data. The inefficiencies revealed by the data were obvious. If left unaddressed, Margaret and the others would have to endure unnecessary hardships. All right. I stood up decisively and walked over to Margaret's desk. She had just finished a call with a client. Margaret, could I have a moment of your time? Of course. Is something wrong? She answered with a gentle smile. I have a proposal regarding this branch's logistics efficiency. I see. Then let's discuss it in the reception room. Margaret stood up and led me to the small reception room. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, gently illuminating the table in the reception room. Margaret poured tea for both of us and placed a cup in front of me. So, what's your proposal? While analyzing the data, I noticed something. This branch is doing excellent work, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. I pulled out my tablet and displayed the materials I had prepared. The screen showed complex graphs and formulas. By applying a delivery route optimization algorithm, we can expect significant improvements over the current patterns. Specifically, by rearranging the delivery sequence to focus on urban areas in the morning, we can complete urban deliveries during the first phase, and in the afternoon, switch to a more efficient radial pattern toward the mountainous areas. With this method, fuel consumption can be reduced by 17% and working hours by 27%. Furthermore, by subdividing the delivery time slots, we can reduce customer waiting times as well. I scrolled through the tablet, explaining the complex formulas and optimization theories. It was a customized model based on one developed at the U.S. headquarters, tailored for the Greenfield branch. I had analyzed all the data and was confident I had derived a theoretically perfect solution. However, a slight wrinkle appeared between Margaret's brows. I see, Theodore, your theory is wonderful, but You built this theory without actually knowing the field, didn't you? I was momentarily confused by her words. No, I analyzed 3 years' worth of data. The results are statistically significant. Maybe statistically. But in this region, there are many factors that numbers alone can't measure. Margaret stood up and pointed outside the window. In those mountains, there are households made up solely of elderly people. Morning deliveries double as welfare checks. If we shift them to the afternoon, responses to emergencies could be delayed. Also, road conditions here change drastically with the seasons and weather. During spring thaw, some mountain roads become impassable. In summer, certain routes get congested with tourists. You can't grasp these variables just by processing data, can you? I have already processed those as statistical variances. Outliers have been excluded. And that's exactly the problem. Margaret cut in firmly. What you call outliers are everyday realities here. There's a reality that can't be dismissed as mere theory. No, this is an optimal solution based on theory. It uses methodologies proven around the world. This is a rural town in Japan, Theodore. It's not Boston or Tokyo. Don't assume the same methods will work here. Margaret's words weren't cold, but they carried real strength. The air in the reception room grew tense. I see no reason to reject efficiency. We should speak based on data, not emotion. I'm not speaking from emotion. I'm speaking from 10 years of experience and the facts I've accumulated working here. You've only been in this town for a month. I was born and raised here. I know every customer's face, family structure, and daily rhythm. Delivery isn't just about moving goods. It's about connecting people. Still, that's no justification for inefficiency. With this plan, we can serve more people faster. Even if it means sacrificing the quality of the service, I was momentarily at a loss for words. Efficiency and quality can coexist. I understand why you want to believe that. But there are variables here that no formula can account for. A heavy silence fell over the reception room. Our gazes locked. I let out a deep sigh. In Boston, at headquarters, and now even here. Why does no one understand my theory? The numbers are so clear. The words slipped out before I realized it, but they seemed to have reached Margaret's ears as well. Her expression showed a hint of surprise, and then a look as if she had realized something. Until now, no one has tried to point out your flaws, have they? Flaws? I raised my voice without thinking. Margaret picked up the tablet from the table and stared at the screen. Theodore, would you come with me tomorrow to inspect the delivery routes? All I can do is show you the living information of this town. After that, I want you to judge with your own eyes and your own mind. I hesitated for a moment. Admitting that my theory might be wrong was something my pride resisted. Please, just come with me. There was undeniable confidence in her eyes. She was different from the people I had met before. Pushed by that unwavering gaze, I replied reluctantly. All right, but if seeing it proves my theory correct, I expect it to be implemented immediately. Of course. Margaret smiled. Meet me in front of the branch at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We'll join the first delivery route. Got it, 7 o'clock. Margaret nodded with satisfaction. Next morning at 7, just as promised, I waited in front of the branch and climbed into the small delivery truck that Margaret was driving. Today, you'll experience part of my delivery route. First, urban delivery points. After that, we'll head into the mountains. I took out my tablet and displayed the optimized route map I had created yesterday. According to the data, focusing on urban deliveries first and then heading to the mountains would be more efficient. It would reduce the driving distance by about 12 kilometers. That might be true in theory. Without arguing, Margaret pulled the vehicle up to a small supermarket, our first delivery stop. I'll be delivering to several stores now. Just watch for now. She skillfully unloaded the packages and carried them inside to the back of the store. She didn't just drop off the goods. She exchanged a few words with the shop owner. It seemed like these deliveries were also an opportunity for information exchange. It was the same at the next few locations. Margaret chatted warmly with each customer, and some elderly shopkeepers visibly brightened at the mere sight of her. After finishing the urban deliveries, we headed toward the mountains. We arrived at a small settlement halfway up the mountainside. It seemed we had arrived quite a bit earlier than scheduled. Let's wait about 5 minutes. Why? Wouldn't it be more efficient to deliver now? Olivia is usually harvesting vegetables in the backyard at this time. She wouldn't hear the doorbell. Saying that, Margaret waited patiently, checking her watch. Sure enough, 5 minutes later, an elderly woman came back from the backyard, and when she spotted Margaret, her face lit up with a huge smile. Margaret, you're always right on time. It really helps me. Good morning, Olivia. Are your grandchildren visiting today? No, they're planning to come this weekend. Listening to their conversation, I gradually began to understand. This wasn't just about deliveries. It was a service adapted to the daily rhythms of the local residents. It was the same at the next few stops. At one house, Margaret was asked to deliver medication. At another, she checked on a special food item that had been ordered the previous week. She handled all of it smoothly and without hesitation. Around noon, she drove over the mountain pass toward the neighboring valley. The road grew even narrower, forcing us to make several tight U-turns. Looking at the map, I was stunned. This route was clearly inefficient. Rather than circling the valley, it would be faster to cross directly over the bridge. Margaret, why are we taking such a roundabout way? If we cross the bridge over the valley, the travel distance would be less than half. Oh, you mean Hawk Bridge? Yes, it does exist. But the vehicle stopped at a narrow section of the mountain road. Below us stretched a deep gorge, and far in the distance, a small bridge could be seen. That's Hawk Bridge. It looks impressive on the map, but in reality, it's so narrow that larger vehicles can't cross. Plus, it's steep and becomes dangerously slippery on rainy days. I was at a loss for words. On the map, it seemed like a sturdy bridge, but in reality, it was just a narrow single-lane crossing. Besides, if we go around the valley clockwise, we can efficiently visit every settlement without having to backtrack, Margaret explained. Her explanation made perfect sense. In my route plan, crossing the valley directly was supposed to save time. But the reality was full of elements that weren't reflected in the maps or data. As the local conditions unfolded before my eyes, I had no choice but to admit that my plan was detached from reality. You okay? You suddenly got quiet, Margaret said. I snapped out of my daze at the sound of her voice. Margaret, I was wrong. Calculations alone aren't enough. Without knowing the field, true optimization is impossible. That's right. She agreed without hesitation, and I couldn't help but chuckle. But Theodore, I'm not denying your talent. Once you know the field, your incredible mind will be a huge asset. You'll come up with ideas I could never think of on my own. Margaret said this with a serious expression. You really believe that? I do. If someone like you builds theories based on a real understanding of the field, our work will become even better. Her words gave me a spark of hope. Margaret, could I ask you for a favor? I'd like to continue accompanying you on deliveries. There are still routes I haven't seen, and I'd like to learn the seasonal differences too. Of course. Margaret laughed softly. I felt my face flush slightly. In just one day, something inside me had begun to change. Theory and the field. Equations and people. By understanding both, maybe I could make a contribution that only I could make. That possibility filled my tired body with new energy. The early summer sunlight streamed through the window, drawing a bright rectangle on the office floor. Theodore. At the sound of my name being called, I looked up from the data analysis I had been absorbed in. I saw Margaret hurrying toward my desk. Her face was filled with a mix of excitement and tension. What's wrong? You look like something big happened. Margaret, still catching her breath, stood beside my chair and began speaking in a small voice. We secured the big contract with Greenfield Hospital. My eyes widened at her words. Securing a contract with Greenfield Hospital had been a long-standing goal for the branch. It was the largest medical institution in the area, and handling their logistics would mean great stability and trust for the branch. Until now, a major competing company had dominated that contract. Really? How did you manage it? The hospital had grown dissatisfied with their current logistics provider. Their main complaints were the slow emergency deliveries and the lack of local knowledge among the staff. So, I proposed our locally rooted service model. I also introduced the real-time optimized route system you developed, especially for emergency medical deliveries. That system? It was the one we had just completed last month. The system that analyzes weather and traffic conditions in real time to generate the fastest delivery routes. It was a joint achievement combining my mathematical models with Margaret's field expertise. Yes, Dr. Peterson, the hospital director, showed particular interest. He highly praised it, saying, "It balances mathematical precision with a deep understanding of the local area." The contract starts next month. It's a comprehensive deal: 24-hour emergency medical deliveries, priority responses during crises, and building a network with local clinics. That's amazing, Margaret. I spoke from the heart, genuinely impressed. Her sales skills and negotiation abilities were the real deal. But the real challenge starts now. This is a much bigger contract than anything we've handled before, and above all, it's a service that involves people's lives. We absolutely cannot afford to fail. Margaret's expression tightened slightly. I stood up and placed a hand on her shoulder. Leave the system part to me. I'll make sure it's airtight. I'll prepare multiple emergency route patterns so we can handle any situation. Thank you, Theodore. Gratitude and trust shone in Margaret's eyes. Since the hospital contract was secured, I had noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere around the branch. During a lunch break while Margaret was out, I was making coffee in the break room. At a table in the back, I overheard Barbara and a few other employees talking in low voices. Another win for Margaret. Barbara's voice was filled with obvious resentment. Seriously, now she'll get even more praise from the branch manager. But come on, it's not surprising, right? With looks like hers, even the hospital directors would fall for her. My grip on the coffee cup tightened. I could feel my heart pounding. Without thinking, I turned around. "I can hear you." As I spoke in a quiet but clear voice, the conversation at the table came to an abrupt halt. Barbara and the others stiffened. "You think Margaret won the contract just because she's beautiful? That's ridiculous. The contract with Greenfield Hospital was the result of the trust she built. She thoroughly researched the regional medical needs and understood the hospital's true concerns." Barbara opened her mouth to say something, but I continued. "She comes in earlier than anyone and leaves later than anyone. Even on her days off, she's out there for the clients. Haven't you seen that? She's not chasing sales numbers. She's working to make this town better." That kind of dedication is what convinced the hospital. Barbara stood up and raised her voice. "You're defending her so much. Are you getting something out of it? Maybe you two have a special relationship?" At that moment, something inside me snapped. I support Margaret because I believe in the value of her work. If you can't recognize that, maybe you're the ones who don't belong in this job. "What did you say?" Barbara stepped forward, but just then, the door to the break room opened. Standing there was Margaret. "What's going on?" Her calm voice spread through the room. Barbara quickly averted her eyes. "Theodore, come with me," Margaret said curtly and stepped out the door. Without hesitation, I followed her. We walked to a quiet corner of the hallway, where Margaret turned to face me. I heard everything from outside the door. Margaret gave a tired smile. "You're really hopeless, you know. If you cause trouble like this, you might not be able to go back to headquarters." Her words made me feel a flicker of anger. I may be clumsy, but so what? If I can't protect Margaret, then I don't mind being clumsy. Margaret's eyes widened slightly at my impulsive words. Margaret faces her work more seriously than anyone. She thinks about the community and works hard for the company. I can't stand by while she's talked about like that behind her back. Margaret's expression softened at my words. Thank you, Theodore. But I don't want you to lose your place here because of me. You're someone who's needed here. What's important to me is being able to work with you, Margaret. As soon as I said that, I saw a faint blush appear on Margaret's cheeks. Honestly, you really are hopeless, but maybe that clumsiness is part of your charm. She smiled softly and lightly touched my arm. Margaret, come on, let's get back. We have work to do. As we walked down the hallway, I felt a new bond had formed between us. Outside the branch office window, heavy, lead-colored clouds hung low. The rain was growing even fiercer, pounding violently against the glass. It had been raining continuously since yesterday, without even a brief pause. I frowned unconsciously and checked the weather forecast displayed on my tablet. The forecast showed that the rain would continue. Theodore, Margaret, come to the reception room immediately. Dr. Peterson from Greenfield Hospital is waiting on a video call. Margaret and I exchanged glances and immediately headed for the reception room. On the large monitor, Dr. Peterson's face appeared, tightened by fatigue and tension. Behind him, doctors and nurses were moving hurriedly. A patient involved in a traffic accident has been brought in. They are suffering from multiple traumatic injuries with massive bleeding and urgently require surgery. At Dr. Peterson's words, the atmosphere in the reception room became tense. However, due to the ongoing torrential rain, our stock of blood products is running dangerously low, especially B-type Rh-negative blood packs. Our regular supply from the east side was cut off by a landslide last night. Is it only blood products that you need? Margaret asked calmly. No, we also urgently need tropulin hemostatic agents and a special vascular repair agent. Normally, we would procure them from the central hospital, but all major roads are blocked. The southern highway is submerged. The eastern mountain path is closed by a landslide. The western detour route has multiple collapse points, and the northern mountain road has also been reported closed due to a landslide. I picked up my tablet and opened the map app. All the main routes leading to the hospital were marked in red. What about helicopters? Stanley spoke up. All helicopters are currently deployed for flood rescue operations in the northern part of the prefecture. The earliest one could return would be in 3 hours. At Dr. Peterson's words, silence fell over the reception room. If the needed supplies don't arrive within an hour, we won't be able to start the surgery. Please, you're the logistics professionals. Please lend us your expertise. I looked at Margaret. Her eyes were filled with determination. We will deliver them. Please send us an accurate list of the necessary items, their weights, and their storage locations immediately. Margaret's voice was calm, yet full of unwavering conviction. Dr. Peterson's eyes widened slightly, as if he had found a ray of hope. I'll send it immediately. Please, this patient's life is in your hands. When the video call ended, a heavy silence filled the reception room. Outside, the rain grew even stronger, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Stanley wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief and looked at Margaret. Margaret, can we really do this? If we fail this emergency delivery, we won't just lose the medical logistics contract. If something goes wrong, the company could be held responsible. Headquarters has high hopes for this contract. If we lose it, it could threaten the very survival of this branch. Fear tinged Stanley's voice. Margaret looked straight at Stanley. There was no hesitation in her eyes. We will succeed. Margaret then left the reception room, returned to the office, and gathered all the employees. Let me explain the situation. There's a patient at Greenfield Prefectural Hospital who urgently needs surgery. They are suffering from multiple traumatic injuries with massive bleeding. We must deliver blood products and specialized hemostatic agents within 1 hour, or the patient's life will be in danger. However, all major roads are blocked. The southern route is flooded. The eastern mountain road is closed by a landslide. The western highway is collapsed in several places, and the northern mountain path is also closed. Margaret calmly continued her explanation. A murmur rose among the employees. Barbara raised her voice. So you're saying, We're completely surrounded? No way by land? That's right. All the usual routes are unavailable. Margaret's words made the tension in the office skyrocket. Then how are we supposed to deliver it? You said helicopters are already deployed elsewhere, right? The river's flooded and the bridges are underwater? Mountain roads have collapsed? This is totally impossible. Barbara's voice grew louder, and her fear began to spread among the other employees. Yeah, it's impossible no matter how you look at it. I've never seen every route shut down before. One after another, pessimistic voices filled the room, and the office verged on panic. Everyone, calm down. Panic won't solve anything. What we need right now is a clear head. Margaret's voice echoed through the chaotic office, but the employees' agitation did not subside. Telling us to calm down won't fix this. How are we supposed to deliver anything? This is impossible. The voices crossed over one another, and the tension in the room rose sharply. Stanley stood by the window, clutching his head as he stared at the rain pounding against the glass. Margaret, isn't this chaos because of your poor schedule management? Barbara's cold voice cut through the uproar. Everyone's gaze turned toward her. She crossed her arms and looked Margaret up and down. This heavy rain was forecasted. As the sales team leader, you should have enforced strict risk management. Planning for emergency supply transport and securing alternative routes were your responsibilities, weren't they? That's. Margaret started to respond, but another female employee interrupted. Yeah, everyone says Margaret always handles everything perfectly, but what happened this time? What about the disaster transport manual? Weren't you the one who drafted it? Sharp criticisms were hurled one after another. Margaret stood tall, silently taking in their words. Barbara turned to Stanley. Stanley, don't you think some kind of disciplinary action is necessary? We should remove Margaret and reorganize the sales team. Otherwise, we'll just keep making the same mistakes. Stanley turned away from the window and looked around at the employees with a face full of confusion and fatigue. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward Margaret. There was hesitation in his eyes. You're right, we do need to clarify who is responsible. At those words, murmuring broke out again, and the accusing looks toward Margaret increased. I could see the blood drain from Margaret's face. Her fingertips trembled slightly. That's enough. My voice roared through the tense office. Everyone turned toward me. Right now, a patient's life is in danger. Is there any discussion more important than that? Barbara looked like she was about to argue, but I had no intention of listening. I connected my tablet to the large monitor and began typing furiously. Maps, weather data, and topographical charts appeared one after another on the screen. If we analyze all possible routes, there's still a way to deliver. Based on current rainfall calculations, the southern prefectural road is completely flooded, but the small valley path might still have lower water levels. Based on past patterns, there's a 96% chance the old forestry road to the east is still intact. The old forestry road? Stanley raised his voice in surprise. Yes, it's an old logging road used 30 years ago. It's not shown on current maps, but by analyzing aerial photographs and terrain data, traces of it are still visible. I zoomed in on the screen and showed the traces of the old forestry road. But that road also hits a river midway. With the current water level, we won't be able to cross. Sighs escaped from the employees. But I still hadn't given up. If we go about 100 meters downstream along the river, there's a point where the water disperses. There, we can cross with a small boat. If we use the small boat stored in the fisherman's warehouse, we can get across and reach the northern settlement. From there, we can link up with local motorcycle couriers. They have small bikes that can handle the mountain terrain. My analysis didn't stop. Weather data, topographical maps, road information, and local knowledge all converged in my mind toward a single solution. Finally, we'll hand the supplies over to the hospital staff by the emergency staircase behind the hospital. Considering the total weight and cold storage requirements of the supplies, If we use these specialized carrying cases, we can safely transport them. The cases are lined with shock absorbers and can maintain the required temperature for up to 2 hours. Calculating everything, the total delivery time is 42 minutes. With a safety margin, we can make it within 50 minutes. I hit the final key and displayed the completed route on the large screen. The complicated, intertwined route clearly showed the path to the hospital. The branch office fell completely silent. Everyone stared at me in stunned amazement. How? How could you come up with something so complex in just a few minutes? Stanley asked, his voice trembling. At that moment, a middle-aged male employee standing near the entrance muttered, "Wait a second, Theodore. That name sounds familiar." He tapped on his phone several times. Then his eyes widened. "I knew it. Theodore, you're the gold medalist from the International Mathematical Olympiad 10 years ago, aren't you?" The entire office froze at those words. All eyes turned toward me. The male employee, holding up his phone, spoke excitedly. "No mistake. My son is aiming for the Math Olympiad, so we've looked up past champions many times. You represented Japan at age 18, won the gold medal, were specially invited to an American university, earned a PhD at the youngest age ever, and led a complex systems algorithm project in Boston. That's you, right?" On the smartphone screen was a newspaper article from 10 years ago, showing a younger picture of me. Murmurs spread throughout the branch. Margaret stood stunned for a few seconds, but quickly regained her composure and stepped toward me. "Theodore, is that true?" I shrugged awkwardly. "Well, it's something from a long time ago." The employees looked at me with a mixture of respect and awe. Their gaze was clearly different from before. Only Margaret was different. She seemed deep in thought for a moment, but then she gave a small smile. "All right, everyone. Theodore's past is not the point. What matters now is putting his plan into action. But there are a few things we need to supplement from a field perspective." She stood next to me and pointed at the map. "First, about the entrance to the old forestry road. Locals call it Hawk's Nest Path. There's no sign, so you'll need to turn left at the spot where two big pine trees stand side by side. This time of year, bamboo grass covers the entrance, so it's hard to see. And be careful going down the riverbank. It's steep and likely slippery from the rain. Bring ropes and rubber boots." Margaret continued to give precise instructions one after another. The employees quickly began moving according to her directions. She continued, "As for the back entrance of the hospital, it's usually locked. We need to contact the hospital in advance and have them ready to receive us. Since regular phone lines might be jammed, use the local disaster radio network. We can ask Charles for authorization. Now, there's no time to lose. Everyone, act according to your assigned roles." At Margaret's voice, the employees moved all at once. The once chaotic branch now moved like a single, coordinated organism toward a shared goal. And so, the delivery began. Margaret and I stayed at the branch, monitoring the progress of the operation. Reports from the employees came in one after another over the radio. "We've secured the old forestry road. Small boat ready. Motorbike couriers are in position." Margaret gripped the radio tightly and continued giving precise instructions. "Team 1, watch the river water level carefully. Team 2, double-check the handoff point for the supplies." I checked the latest weather data on my tablet and made real-time adjustments to the route. "Margaret, the water level of the southern tributary is rising. Please instruct Team 2 to take a detour." Margaret immediately picked up the radio and relayed the instructions. We were perfectly in sync. Outside the window, the rain continued to pour down heavily, but the atmosphere inside the branch had completely changed. The voices of criticism from earlier had disappeared, and everyone was now focused on the mission as one team. Supplies loaded safely onto the small boat. I checked the clock. It had been 27 minutes since departure. There was still some margin, but I mentally prepared for unexpected problems. A tense voice came over the radio. "We have a problem. A small landslide occurred on the planned route for the motorbike courier. Margaret immediately grabbed the radio. Which location? Give me the details. About 500 meters past the fork in the road. A 10-meter wide landslide is blocking the way. People can pass, but not bikes. Margaret looked at me. I was already operating my tablet, searching for an alternative route. North from the fork, there's a narrow farm road. If they take it, they can detour. It will cause about a 5-minute delay. We looked at each other for a moment. Margaret nodded. Take the North Farm Road. It's overgrown with grass, but you should be able to get through. Understood. The reply over the radio brought a wave of relief to everyone at the branch. I checked the clock again. It had been 35 minutes since departure. 25 minutes left. I murmured under my breath. There should still be some margin according to the calculations, but I was internally tense. 12 minutes later. Supplies have arrived at the hospital. Handed over at the staff entrance. Surgery will begin immediately. A report over the radio caused cheers to erupt inside the branch. At that moment, Margaret finally let the tears she had been holding back fall. She covered her face with both hands, her shoulders trembling as the employees gently surrounded her. Margaret, thank you so much. If it weren't for your instructions, we never would have made it. The employees who had been criticizing her earlier were now voicing words of gratitude. Stanley stepped forward and raised his voice. Today's achievement will be reported to headquarters. There's absolutely no question of holding Margaret responsible. Her leadership saved the branch in this crisis. She deserves to be praised. Stanley placed a hand on Margaret's shoulder. Margaret bowed deeply. Thank you, but this wasn't achieved by me alone. It was thanks to Theodore's calculations and everyone's cooperation. I felt my heart warm at her words, even though I was a little embarrassed. As the branch was enveloped in a celebratory mood, Barbara quietly pushed through the crowd and stood in front of Margaret. Barbara's face was flushed, and her eyes were filled with tears. Margaret, I want to apologize to you. I've been jealous of you all along. You're so perfect, so beautiful, so good at your job, and loved by the local people. Every time I saw you, I was painfully reminded of my own shortcomings. Margaret looked a little surprised, but quietly waited for Barbara's words. Barbara struggled with her voice, but continued speaking. That's why I said things to drag you down and gossiped behind your back. Especially today, my attitude was terrible. I am truly sorry. Barbara bowed deeply. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. As everyone watched in tense silence, Margaret slowly approached Barbara. Raise your head, Barbara. Actually, I owe you an apology. At Margaret's words, not only Barbara, but also the surrounding employees showed surprised expressions. I took too much pride in my own work and forgot the importance of working as a team. You have wonderful talents. Your accuracy in organizing data is second to none, and your attentiveness to clients is remarkable. I failed to properly acknowledge your strengths. Margaret gently took Barbara's hands. From now on, let's truly work together as a team. I want you to keep pointing out my shortcomings. I'm sure there are things only you can see. Tears rolled down Barbara's cheeks. In a clumsy movement, she stepped closer to Margaret and suddenly hugged her. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Barbara's sobbing voice echoed through the branch. Margaret gently patted her back and spoke. It's all right now. From here on, let's work hard together. As Margaret said that, spontaneous applause erupted from those around them. At that moment, the branch phone rang. The tense atmosphere returned instantly, and Stanley quickly picked up the receiver. Hello, this is Global Emotion Logistics, Greenfield branch. Yes. Yes, I see. No, we were just doing what was necessary. Yes, thank you very much. After hanging up, Stanley looked around at the employees, his face bright again. The surgery was a success. Dr. Peterson sent his heartfelt thanks. Thanks to all of you. A life was saved, he said. Sighs of relief and loud applause filled the branch. Some patted each other on the shoulders, sharing the joy. Margaret spotted me standing a little apart and gave me a small nod with a smile. Outside the window, the long-lasting rain was finally letting up, and the light of the setting sun shone on the distant mountains. The gentle light warmly illuminated the faces of everyone inside the branch. A few days later in the afternoon, work at the Greenfield branch had returned to normal. The successful emergency delivery had even been featured in the local newspaper, bringing new confidence and unity to the branch. I was at my desk, working on a new optimization algorithm for mountain area delivery routes. The model, incorporating seasonal weather patterns and tourist influx patterns as variables, showed a 15% improvement in delivery efficiency over previous systems. "Theodore, do you have a moment?" Stanley called out to me. I paused my calculations and looked up. "What is it?" There was a call from the head office, HR department. "They want to speak with you directly. Could you wait in the reception room for the call?" Wondering what it could be about, I nodded and stood up. When I entered the reception room, a phone was already placed on the table. Right on time, the phone rang, and I picked it up. "Hello, this is Theodore." "Theodore, your handling of the emergency medical supply delivery was outstanding. Stanley has given me a detailed report. I hear your mathematical models were the key." "Thank you, but it was thanks to Margaret and the cooperation of the entire branch." Kenneth from the HR department chuckled slightly. "You're humble. That's a good quality. Now, the main reason for this call, we'd like to offer you a return to headquarters." For a moment, I was at a loss for words. "Return?" "To be precise, a promotion. We'd like you to join the newly established Global Optimization Strategy Division at headquarters. You would be responsible for optimizing logistics networks worldwide. Of course, your compensation will be significantly improved." There was a slight excitement in Kenneth's voice, unlike his usual calm demeanor. "Actually, President Valentine has taken a personal interest in your background. Why is a math Olympiad gold medalist placed at a rural branch?" he said. "He really said that?" "We dug into your past achievements, about the special optimization project you led in Boston. It's apparently regarded as a legendary success in the industry. When President Valentine learned that you spearheaded it, he was thrilled." I couldn't help but give a wry smile. They had ignored me when I was demoted, but now that they knew my achievements, their attitude had changed. "The decision to demote you was a mistake. I'll admit it honestly. But your true worth was proven through this emergency response. We've finally come to realize it." I listened in silence. "Could you come to Tokyo next week? President Valentine wants to meet with you personally. It's very unusual for him to make such a request." There was pride in Kenneth's voice. It almost sounded as if he were taking credit for it himself. "I'll think about it," I answered. Normally, I would have jumped at such an enthusiastic offer. But now, I hesitated. After hanging up the phone, silence returned to the reception room. The afternoon sunlight, streaming through the window, cast a bright square on the table. Returning to headquarters. A promotion. Direct recognition from President Valentine. Once, these were offers I would have accepted without a second thought. But now, the image of Margaret's smile came to mind. The achievements we had built together at this small branch. The joy of doing work where you could see the faces of the people you were helping. The value created not just from theoretical calculations, but by merging them with real-world wisdom. There was a light knock at the door, and Margaret peeked in. "Theodore, what's going on? I heard you were suddenly called." There was a look of concern on her face. I hesitated for a moment, but decided to be honest. "I got an offer to return to headquarters." Margaret's expression froze for a moment. "I see. That's wonderful." She slowly turned toward me. There was a forced smile on her face. "It's a place where you can fully use your talents. That's what you always wanted, right? I'll support you. It would be a waste for a math Olympiad gold medalist to stay hidden away in a small town branch like this." Margaret pressed her lips together. "Theodore, it's been an honor working with you, even if just for a short while." "Thank you. Now, I'll get back to work." Margaret turned on her heel. Without thinking, I grabbed her arm. "Wait, Margaret. There's still so much I want to build here. I want to combine local knowledge and theory to create a new form of logistics. Margaret turned back toward me, her eyes widening. Sure, working at headquarters would allow me to pursue theory on a large scale. But here, you can see the faces of the people you're helping. You can feel directly how your work supports someone's life. I slowly pointed outside the window. The view of the small town surrounded by mountains spread out before us. That emergency delivery during the heavy rain wouldn't have succeeded without both my mathematical models and your knowledge of the area. Headquarters in Boston are attractive, sure, but you're not there. I need you, Margaret. What about you? Tears fell from Margaret's eyes. I need you too. I don't want you to go anywhere. I gently held her trembling hand. Margaret, let's make the Greenfield branch the best local logistics hub in Japan. For this town and the people living here, let's create the best logistics service together. Margaret wiped her tears softly at my words. Bathed in the clear sunlight pouring through the window, her smile was more radiant than any I had seen before. A few months later, in autumn, the Greenfield branch had been completely transformed. A large map now hung on the office wall, with delivery routes color-coded by season. It was filled with my meticulous calculations and Margaret's local insights. On tablets and monitors, the logistics management system I developed was running, updating delivery statuses in real time. Theodore, the fuel efficiency and time reduction figures for last month are out. Margaret spread the report with a bright smile. The graph clearly showed significant improvement. Compared to the same month last year, fuel consumption is down 21%, and delivery times are shortened by an average of 17 minutes. At this pace, annual cost savings are likely to exceed expectations. I answered as I checked the data. Other employees gathered around as well, wearing satisfied expressions at the results. It's all thanks to Theodore's optimization algorithm. Barbara spoke honestly. She had now become a trusted advisor to Margaret, supporting the sales team. No, this is thanks to Margaret's human perspective. If I had only pursued numbers, we wouldn't have achieved these results. When I said that, Margaret smiled a little shyly. That afternoon, several executives from headquarters, who usually never visited regional branches, came for an inspection. Dressed in suits, they were clearly surprised by the lively atmosphere inside the branch. After the inspection, Simon, the senior managing director, spoke with admiration. The fusion of mathematical modeling and local knowledge at the Greenfield branch is exactly the direction we should be aiming for, particularly incorporating the living rhythms of the local people into delivery optimization is groundbreaking. As he said this, Simon turned his gaze toward me. To be honest, at first I questioned why Theodore chose to stay here. It seemed like a waste to have a math Olympiad gold medalist hidden away in the countryside. But now, having seen it with my own eyes, I realize it was my judgment to call him back to Tokyo that was wrong. Staying here was the right decision. Theodore's mathematical talent combined with Margaret's deep understanding and commitment to the local area has brought new value to our company. Simon patted me on the shoulder. Thank you very much, I responded quietly. I deeply felt that what I had once seen as a demotion had become the place where I could truly make the most of my talents. As evening passed and the branch grew quiet, Margaret approached my desk. Want to go up to the rooftop? The stars are beautiful tonight. Yeah, let's go. Margaret and I stepped out onto the rooftop of the branch. Countless stars glittered across the night sky. Neither in Boston nor in Tokyo had I ever seen a sky like this. Our decision wasn't wrong. Margaret spoke as her hair swayed in the night breeze. Yeah, we can achieve even more from here. I looked up at the starry sky. Now I could truly feel that I was using my talents for the good of the community. And it was far more fulfilling than my days in Boston. Theodore, what kind of future do you want to create from here? I thought for a moment before answering Margaret's question. A form of logistics that enriches people's lives. A service where data and heart come together. That sounds like a wonderful future. Yeah, and if it's with you, Margaret, I know we can make it happen. I gently took her hand. The warmth of her hand was comforting against the cold night air. Margaret smiled. Her smile shone brightly, filled with hope, just like the future of this small town. I had lived in the world of formulas and theories, struggling with the distance between myself and others. At first, I had seen my transfer to the countryside as a defeat. But meeting Margaret changed everything. Her practical knowledge and drive, and my mathematical thinking. I realized that two strengths, which at first seemed to be in conflict, could lead to true solutions only when they complemented each other, and that people shine the brightest when they bring out the best in each other's strengths. Where different talents meet, solutions are born that could never exist alone. Once called a genius yet burdened by loneliness, I had now found companions with whom I could dream about the future under the starry sky. That, perhaps, was the greatest treasure I discovered here. Something no formula could ever express.